to use words like our troops. When you're a Christian, it seems indeed impossible. Our is the ancient family that is so much more richly diverse, deeply rooted, and fantastic than any of the small we's of nation, ethnicity, or family.
I once heard it said that our politics are shaped by what we see out the window. And I grew up in East Tennessee, and that little Bible Belt world shaped my whole social and political worldview. In 1992, when I was in high school, I thought there was no better way to pursue the way of Christ than to organize the Bush Quail campaign. So that's what I did, you know. And I had all the big ideologies around the big political questions like homosexuality and abortion, all those things that Jesus had so much to say about, right? I'm glad some of you got that joke. But you can have all the right answers and have very little to show for that. And that's what I saw in my life. That the great challenge for us today as a church is not just right thinking, but right living. What we see in Jesus is not an invitation to a political rhetoric or a political agenda, but an invitation to join a movement of people who embody God's good news and hope to the poor. And that's what I love about Mother Teresa, is she was just a pioneer for unborn children and for the pro-life movement, not because she went around wearing an abortion is murder shirt, but because she walked alongside women in tough situations and said, if you're not able to have your baby, you can give it to me. And that's why everybody called her mother. It has an integrity that you just can't argue with. So the big question for us may not be, are we political, but how are we political? Can we be a political movement of hope so that when folks come to us, like they came to Jesus and they said, are you the one we've been waiting for? And he said, tell me what you see. What if they came to us as Christians and they said, are you followers of Jesus? Could our answer be, tell us what you see and tell us what you hear? Does our life reflect the love of Jesus? Because the body of Christ is a people who are supposed to remind the world of Jesus. We're supposed to have the fruits of the Spirit radiate through our lives. And I was speaking recently to a congregation on Sunday morning, and then they kind of flung one on me after my sermon. They said, we want you to close the service by praying for the troops going to Iraq. And they invited the soldiers forward. I'm like, wow, would have liked to have known about that beforehand, you know, but I thought, you know, what am I going to pray? And I just began to pray the fruits of the Spirit over them, one by one. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And as I was praying them, one of those kids began to cry. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, as you prayed those things, I thought, that's what God is like. But that's not who I'm becoming. It's not who I'm becoming, but it's who I want to be. And I told him we would continue to try to walk alongside of him. And that's what it means to be as a church. To be political means we got to walk alongside people who are struggling. Kids like Jesse that see no other way to go to college and figure out another way. Walk alongside mothers in tough situations. And surround ourselves with people who look like Jesus, who remind us of Jesus, so maybe they rub off on us a little, you know. And for me, one of those folks in our community was a young woman named Lydia. She was one of those small, petite women, but just a fireball, you know what I mean, right? And she was on a train one day, and someone pulled a knife on her, and they said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me your bag and get off at the next stop, and don't say a word. And she looked at him and she said, hey, my name's Lydia and I'm from Brazil. My bag's filled with the photographs and addresses of my family and it means a lot to me. But it wouldn't mean anything to you and there's no money in it. I would imagine you like money. And so here's what we're going to do. I've got money in my pocket. I'm going to get $20 out, give it to you, and you get off at the next stop and I won't say anything. And it worked. Ultimately, we hope, we don't have answers to every situation or every question, but what we can say is we're meant to internalize who Christ is inside of ourselves. And then when we react, we don't hope that people will see how good we are, but that they can't help but see the peculiarness of how we live and say, how good is their God.
In a similar manner, consider the Amish, who certainly know what it means to be a peculiar people, colony of heaven as strangers and aliens in the midst of this world. It's easy to imagine how Amish kids grow up kind of just wondering about all of it, saying like, Dad, why can't we have an Xbox? Or why do we dress like this, Mom? Or Dad, why can't we have a car? Or something like that. But in the midst of it, you can hear, imagine their parents saying in return, we're different. Other children may do those things, but we have a different story. We have different roots. We're from a different type of body in the world. And so, in the midst of that, you kind of wonder, out of the peculiarity, it starts to help us see why and how they responded the way they did to a shooter who came into their school about a year or so ago. You may remember a deranged man, insane on his violence, came into an Amish school with a weapon and killed several of their children, and then eventually killed himself. And what did the Amish people do? Well, they knew that now this family no longer had a father. And so they started raising as much funds as they could to help this family in a scholarship and try to take care of them. And they also went to that shooter's funeral. And all this, they just, in their forgiveness and deep sense of forgiveness toward their enemy, they, I think, fascinated the world and showed us a different kind of grace that can permeate the world and overcome evil. So that's why we rejoice of that great Christian peculiarity and write in our book, Amish for Homeland Security.
What would it look like?
In Belize, I met a group of Mennonite farmers who are also very interesting and peculiar. They're great, fascinating people. They're very economically strong people. They build their own homes, they make their own clothes, they grow their own food, they even have a horse-drawn sawmill that they make their own timber with. But they've had hard times for sure, and recently a robber came into their community with nothing good up his sleeve, and he stole all of their community's money, really decimated their abilities to go on from there with their monies. But they tried to do a few things to respond to this robber. He went on his way. He ended up in jail for some various reason. So the Mennonite community did two things. They started printing their own money that's completely useless in the national economy. It's fascinating. Now you can, if you want anything from them, you just ask them. They either have their food in the ground, which they would gladly give to you, or they have their tools, which, are all made in the 1800s. So if you want those, I guess you can ask for them. So they removed some incentive to steal from them. But the second thing they did was they had just gotten fed up with this theft and with this robbery. And so they hunted this guy down and tried to find him when he was going to get released from prison. So they found this guy, and then they built him a house. Without a doubt, this thief was converted in the deepest sense of the word. Most of us just find ourselves either trying to resist evil or complying with it. But these people, in their communal and spiritual and economic strength, they learned how to shun the fear that so drives us and move to overcome evil. Indeed, to overcome it. So this is a testimony to the power of the church, that we can't just be our own individual Christians, but we must be part of this larger body that overcomes evil in the world.